The first time the Galactic Empire set foot on American soil, they laughed. They laughed at the crude ballistic weapons humans clutched in their hands. They laughed at the bunkers reinforced with steel and concrete, as if those could withstand their orbital bombardments. They laughed at the entire species, convinced that humanity was nothing more than a stubborn, primitive race playing at war. That laughter died the moment Captain Jack Donovan pulled his trigger. The war had begun 6 months earlier, when the first of the Empire's landing craft darkened Earth's skies. They came without preamble, without demands, just a cold, calculated strike meant to cow the planet into submission. Nations crumbled in weeks. The United States held out longer than most, but the war was not going well. What could bullets and missiles do against plasma lances and energy shields? Against biomechanical warriors bred for war, their exoskeletal armor immune to standard-issue rounds? Donovan had seen enough of their carnage to know the answer. Not much. He and his team were among the last of the Marine snipers still operational, working in the shadows while what remained of the U.S. military fought a losing battle. Their mission was not to win. Not yet. That was impossible. Their mission was to make the Empire bleed, to turn their confidence into fear, to remind them that humans, when cornered, were the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Which was why Donovan lay motionless in the ruins of a collapsed office tower, his rifle cradled in his arms, watching the alien general through a broken window. The target stood in the center of what had once been downtown Chicago, surrounded by a retinue of Imperial guards. The alien was tall, 7 feet, at least, its carapace gleaming under the red haze of the city's burning skyline. It moved with the arrogance of a creature that had never known fear, its mandibles clicking in some alien dialect as it issued orders. Donovan's spotter, Sergeant Luke Carter, adjusted his scope beside him. That him. Donovan exhaled slowly, steadying his heartbeat. That's him. They called it Overlord Zarathus, one of the Empire's top generals. Every major offensive in North America had been under its command. Taking it out wouldn't end the war, but it would send a message, one written in blood and delivered at 2,500 feet per second. The problem was the shields. Every high-ranking officer was protected by a personal energy field, a shimmering distortion that repelled ballistic and energy-based attacks alike. The Empire thought it made them invincible. They had never met an American sniper. Carter muttered under his breath, checking the wind speed. 5 clicks left. Quarter value. Donovan adjusted, his breathing calm. He didn't think about the war. He didn't think about the millions already dead. He didn't think about what would happen if this failed. He thought only of the shot. His finger tightened on the trigger. The rifle kicked. The bullet screamed through the air, slicing through smoke and ruin, and struck just as Zarathus turned its head. The round impacted the shimmering field, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the shield flickered. A split-second disruption. That was all Donovan needed. The second shot punched through the alien skull. Zarathus collapsed, its towering frame crumpling like a broken marionette. Its guards hesitated, mandibles chattering in alarm. Then the screaming started. Donovan was already moving. He and Carter slipped back into the rubble, vanishing like ghosts, just as the first plasma bolts tore through their previous position. They ran through the ruins, ducking under fallen girders, leaping over charred remains of vehicles. Behind them, the Empire's forces scrambled, panicked. Their general was dead. Their shield technology, so perfect, so untouchable, had been beaten. A victory, however small. By the time they reached the extraction point, Their comms were alive with chatter. Reports of the kill had spread. The remaining American forces, scattered and desperate, had been given something priceless: proof that the Empire could bleed. Carter grinned, wiping soot from his face. "They're never going to see us the same way again." Donovan slung his rifle over his shoulder. He didn't smile. The war was far from over, and the Empire would not take this loss lightly. But now, for the first time, they were afraid. The Empire did not take the assassination of Overlord Zarathus lightly. Within days, the sky above America swarmed with surveillance drones. Imperial patrols doubled, their tactics shifting from overconfident occupation to brutal suppression. Entire districts were razed in retaliation. The message was clear: humanity could not be allowed to believe they had a chance. Captain Jack Donovan and Sergeant Luke Carter watched from the ruins of an old freeway overpass, scanning the streets below. What had once been a quiet suburban town was now a fortified occupation zone. Alien walkers, insectoid in design, clanked through the streets, their sensor arrays sweeping for movement. Elite guards, clad in iridescent battle armor, patrolled in tight formations. "They're spooked," Carter muttered, chewing on a strip of dried meat. "Never seen this twitchy before." "They should be," Donovan said, adjusting his rifle's scope. He had been studying the aliens' behavior for hours. The Empire was methodical, always adapting. If the shield disruption trick worked once, it wouldn't work again. The question was, what was their next move? They got their answer an hour later. The distant hum of engines sent a chill down Donovan's spine. From the north, a sleek, metallic shape glided into view, a new kind of drone, different from the bulky reconnaissance units they had encountered before. This one was lean, aerodynamic, its gunmetal hull pulsing with flickers of blue light. It hovered above the town, scanning, watching. Carter cursed. "That's new." The drone shifted position suddenly, and a blinding lance of energy erupted from its underside, vaporizing a collapsed building across the street. The air rippled from the impact, sending a shockwave through the ruins. Donovan's gut tightened. This wasn't a scouting unit. It was a sniper hunter. They pulled back immediately, moving low through the rubble. The Empire had learned their lesson. No more leaving high-ranking officers exposed. No more complacency. Instead, they had built a weapon specifically to counter long-range threats. Back at their safe house, a half-collapsed parking garage, they rendezvoused with the rest of the team. Corporal Hayes, their engineer, was already picking apart data from their reconnaissance drones. Next to him, Sergeant Boone was cleaning his rifle, his expression grim. "They're forcing us into close-quarters engagements," Boone said. "We go for a shot. That thing'll melt us before we pull the trigger." "They're trying to break us," Carter muttered. "Make us fight on their terms." Donovan remained silent, staring at the grainy images of the new drone. The Empire's mistake had been underestimating snipers in the first place. Now they had overcorrected. They thought humans were just marksmen with good aim. They didn't understand the patience, the adaptability. A plan began to form. The next night, under cover of darkness, Donovan and Carter infiltrated the outskirts of another occupied zone. The drone was there, hovering like a predator, its sensor arrays scanning every inch of the battlefield. The patrols were tighter than before, the Empire relying on the machine's all-seeing gaze rather than overwhelming numbers. They moved carefully, slipping through the ruins, positioning themselves on the upper floor of a collapsed apartment complex. Donovan set up his rifle, but this time he wasn't aiming at a target, he was waiting. Minutes crawled by, then hours. The drone continued its relentless sweep, passing over their position multiple times. It was fast, almost intelligent in the way it adjusted its patrol route. But it wasn't perfect. At precisely 0300 hours, it hovered just a fraction too long over the open street. Donovan fired, not at the drone, but at the pavement beneath it. The armor-piercing round punched through the concrete, sending up a cloud of dust and debris. The drone reacted instantly, swiveling toward the disturbance. That was its second mistake. From a rooftop 2 blocks away, Boone took the real shot. His bullet struck the drone's exposed undercarriage, the one angle not covered by shielding. The round, a custom-made sabot designed by Hayes, burrowed through the plating and detonated inside the drone's core. The explosion was small, but it was enough. The drone sputtered, its lights flickering, before plummeting to the street below. For the first time since the Empire had adjusted its tactics, the battlefield was silent. Donovan allowed himself a small exhale. They had just proven a fundamental truth. For every adaptation the Empire made, humanity would find a way to break it. But he knew the war was far from over. The Empire had learned to fear snipers. Now it was only a matter of time before they learned to hate them. The first shot missed. That never happened. Captain Jack Donovan adjusted his position instinctively, shifting his rifle's weight against his shoulder, breath steady despite the chaos unraveling around him. The bullet should have struck its mark, a clean kill through the skull of the Empire's latest warlord. Instead, the round had veered, deflected mid-flight, by something unseen. Then came the return fire. A searing plasma bolt ripped through the window frame inches from Donovan's head, melting steel and concrete in an instant. He rolled back, heart hammering. Across the ruined office floor, Sergeant Luke Carter swore and pulled him down. They knew we were here. Another blast slammed into the building structure, shaking the floors beneath them. The mission had gone sideways fast. 3 days earlier, intelligence had confirmed the presence of a new commander overseeing the Empire's campaign in North America, Overlord Vurick. More brutal than his predecessors, Vurick had crushed resistance cells across the Midwest, leaving entire cities in ruin. The team's orders had been clear: eliminate him. But the Empire had learned. Donovan and his men had spent their careers outthinking their enemies, but this time they had walked straight into an ambush. The Empire had not just improved its technology, it had studied them, anticipated them. The moment Donovan had fired, an unseen force had redirected the bullet, and the enemy had responded with terrifying precision. "Sniper hunters," Carter growled. "They built something just for us." Donovan pulled himself to the side, eyes scanning for an exit. "We need to move." The building shuddered as more blasts chewed through its foundation. Outside, alien gunships swept through the air, their searchlights carving through the ruins. The Empire's ground forces were advancing, tightening the noose. Sergeant Boone's voice crackled in Donovan's earpiece. "We're cut off. Got movement closing in fast. 3 squads minimum." Donovan cursed under his breath. "Regroup at fallback point Charlie. Double time." They moved fast, dodging through collapsed hallways and shattered stairwells, barely keeping ahead of the pursuit. But something felt wrong. The enemy was hurting them, funneling them toward a specific path. Then he saw it. One of the creatures crouched on the exposed framework of the building across the street. It was unlike any Imperial soldier they had encountered before. Sleek, elongated limbs, razor-edged carapace. No weapons in its hands, but an eerie, predatory stillness. Its head snapped toward them, and Donovan felt an almost physical weight press against him, like the air itself was bending under its gaze. Then it moved. It didn't fire. It leapt. In the space of a heartbeat, the creature blurred across the gap between buildings. Carter barely had time to raise his rifle before the thing landed on the shattered floor, talons carving into concrete. A flick of its arms sent Carter flying into a wall, his rifle clattering away. Donovan fired point-blank. The bullet struck center mass, then stopped. Not armor, not shields, something else. The round hung in midair for a fraction of a second, then dropped harmlessly to the ground. The creature tilted its head, as if studying him. Donovan moved on instinct, rolling to the side as the thing lunged. He fired again, aiming for its head this time. The bullet curved mid-flight, veering inches off target before striking the far wall. They weren't just facing better armor. They were facing something that could manipulate the laws of physics. Carter groaned from across the room, struggling to get up. The creature turned toward him, raising a single claw. Donovan didn't think. He acted. His knife was in his hand before his mind even registered the movement. He surged forward, slamming the blade into the thing's side. It let out a sharp clicking hiss, not in pain, but in surprise. Then it moved faster than his eyes could follow. Agony exploded across his chest as he was hurled backward, hitting the floor hard. His vision swam, lungs fighting for air. He forced himself up just in time to see Carter stagger to his feet, raising his sidearm. The creature tilted its head again, as if amused. Then, for the first time, it spoke. "The rifle is dead." The voice was wrong. Not mechanical, not organic. Something in between, vibrating in a way that made the air itself hum. Then it was gone, vanishing into the ruins in a blur of motion. They didn't wait to analyze what had just happened. They ran. By the time they reached the fallback point, Boone and Hayes were already waiting. What the hell happened in there? Boone demanded. Donovan took a deep breath. His ribs ached, but he ignored it. New unit. Faster than anything we've seen. And it can bend bullets. Hayes paled. That's impossible. No, Donovan said grimly. It's a problem. A silence fell over them. The rules had changed. Their rifles, their greatest strength, had just been countered. Then Carter chuckled, shaking his head. Guess that means we break the rules. Donovan exhaled slowly. They had spent months staying one step ahead of the Empire, outthinking them at every turn. This was a setback, but nothing more. If the Empire had built something to counter their tactics, they would just have to invent something worse. The hunt wasn't over. It was just getting started. The Empire thought it had one. The sniper was dead. That was what their new hunters believed. That was what the warlord Vurick had reported to his superiors. The human rifles, the one weapon that had humbled them, were now useless. The battlefield belonged to the Empire once more. Captain Jack Donovan intended to prove them wrong. The plan had been months in the making. After the ambush in Chicago, Donovan and his team had gone dark, feeding the Empire's arrogance by letting them believe their new creations had ended the sniper threat. In truth, they had spent that time adapting, rethinking the very concept of marksmanship. If bullets couldn't fly straight, they wouldn't force them to. They would guide them. It started with Sergeant Hayes, who spent sleepless nights dissecting captured alien tech, searching for a way to fight back. He had studied the physics-warping creatures, watched hours of footage, analyzed every engagement. It wasn't magic. It wasn't invincibility. It was a field effect, a distortion zone that twisted projectile paths within a narrow range. The solution wasn't more firepower. It was intelligence, which was why, deep in the ruins of what had once been Denver, Donovan lay prone with a weapon that had never existed before. It looked like a rifle. It felt like a rifle. But inside, it was something new. Instead of a single straight shot, it fired a specialized round, a micromissile, guided by an embedded AI that adjusted its path mid-flight. If the enemy could bend bullets, then this bullet would bend itself. Carter knelt beside him, watching the target through his binoculars. Warlord Vurick. Front and center. The alien stood on a makeshift command platform, issuing orders to a group of elite guards. It had a presence about it, taller than the others, its obsidian carapace marked with the red sigils of its station. Surrounding it, 3 of the sniper hunters stood motionless, their heads swiveling in perfect synchronization, scanning for threats. Carter exhaled slowly. No margin for error. There never is. Donovan adjusted his aim, accounting for the wind, the heat distortion, the artificial gravity shifts caused by the alien's equipment. Then he pressed his finger to the trigger and fired. The shot didn't move like a bullet. The moment it entered the hunter's distortion field, it twisted, curving impossibly, but not away from the target. The round adjusted, weaving through the interference like a snake in water. The hunters realized the deception a fraction of a second too late. Varick's head snapped back, a fist-sized hole punched clean through its skull. For a moment, the battlefield stood frozen. Then, chaos erupted. The guards scrambled for cover, barking orders, plasma fire ripping through the air. The hunters twitched in confusion, their perception of physics broken. One turned toward Donovan's position, mandibles clicking in alarm, just as Boone's round took it through the throat. Carter laughed. Now they know what it feels like. The team moved fast, abandoning their nest as the Empire scrambled to recover. The enemy forces weren't just panicked, they were afraid. The rifle wasn't dead. It had evolved. They fell back into the ruins, gunships sweeping overhead, alien command in disarray. Hayes was already at the exfiltration point, watching the battle unfold through a drone feed. They're losing it. Chain of command is breaking down. Donovan slung his rifle over his shoulder, heart still steady despite the adrenaline pounding through his veins. They had taken everything the Empire threw at them, the shields, the drones, the hunters, and still, they had found a way through. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was war. And for the first time, the Empire was on the losing side.